Hope all is well. The first item is the approval of minutes from May 21st, 2024. So moved. Moved in second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carried. First item on the agenda is PLN 23-010, James Kerr Development in Milford Groundwater Overlay Area. Initial report. Leanne, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a new application from James Kerr. It is a development agreement application. So the subject property is located along Highway 2 in Milford. It is outlined here in red. The property is zoned to dwelling unit residential, the R2 zone, and designated established residential neighborhood. The property totals just over 5,500 square meters, and it is located on the boundary of the Milford Growth Management Area and is within the Milford Groundwater Overlay Zone. So the applicant has requested to enter into a development agreement with the municipality to enable a new subdivision with 6 lots for the development of semi-detached dwellings. These properties can then further be subdivided for a total of 12 units on 11 lots. This is their proposed preliminary plan that they've provided. So there's, this is after they've been further subdivided. So there's, this plan shows 11 lots. For policy analysis, so staff will be reviewing the proposed application based on all of our applicable policies in the municipal planning strategy, and that table, as well as our comments from reviewing agencies, will be provided in the final staff report. So this application is being considered under policy EN 53 of the municipal planning strategy that states within the Milford Groundwater Overlay Zone, council shall consider the following developments through a development agreement application, so subdivisions where more than 4 residential lots are to be created. And as part of that policy, shall also consider the impact of well interference through the submission of a hydrogeological study, as well as policies IM 26 through IM 28, which outlines the evaluation criteria, terms, and conditions for entering into development agreements. For the hydrogeological study, so the applicant engaged with Hera Consulting, who conducted a level 1 groundwater study. So the calculations did suggest there may be insufficient area within the lot to serve as an adequate recharge for the underlying aquifer. However, as the current usage of the land adjacent to it is agricultural farmland, that's not considered to be a concern for this property, and therefore there is sufficient water that is available to support this development, but the water will require treatment. And it also indicated that just due to the close proximity and smaller lots, there may be a possibility for well interference, but the volume of the recharge within this area will be greater than the volume extracted. So what is being brought in will be less than what's being used from the homes. For citizen engagement, so there'll be an initial ad in the paper indicating that this application's under review, and a letter and questionnaire will be mailed to all residents within 300 meters asking for comments on the proposal. And if authorized, a public hearing will be scheduled, and at that time we will again mail out letters to property owners within 300 meters. So we will continue to review the proposal for the new subdivision in Milford. And again, it will be evaluated using all of our applicable policies, and a final recommendation will be made to PAC in the final staff report, and this decision is appealable to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. And the recommendation today is that PAC recommend that council give initial consideration to the development agreement and authorize staff to schedule a public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Leanne. Your recommended motion is before you, as you wish. Counselor Hibb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question to staff. On this property, is the proposal, is it gonna be individual wells for each unit, or is it gonna be one or two big wells, or it doesn't really indicate to, what they're gonna do there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would be a well per property, I believe.
Individual wells?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I will move the recommended motions presented.
It's moved in second. Nobody on to speak. We'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, Leanne. Next item on the agenda is PLN 24-004, RYC property redesignation and rezoning. First reading. Debbie, let me get back here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, the applicant is RYC Property Limited. The property is located in Shubenacadie at the end of Havenwood Drive. The size of the property is 5.9 hectares, and the applicant is looking to have the land use designation and zone change to allow for R2 development. So the surrounding property is majority rural use. There's an existing open space parcel owned by the municipality that's right there indicated in green. And then the beginning part of Havenwood Drive is zoned R2. And this entire property is located in the Shubenacadie Growth Management Area. So again, the purpose of the application is to enable the extension of Havenwood Drive to allow for the construction of 47 semi-detached dwellings for a total of 94 dwelling units. Havenwood Drive had intended to be extended to allow for the continued development of the road. However, limitations with the Shubenacadie sewage treatment facility prevented the land from being further developed. Now that the new wastewater treatment facility is almost complete, development in Shubenacadie is expected to increase. Again, here's a concept plan. So it would be the extension of Havenwood Drive right to the end of the property, and this turning T would have to go up against the subject property. There's a trail that currently goes through the open space that would just have to be realigned, and there'll be a 6 meter wide access for the trail to continue on the other side of the property. The proposed road extension would have to meet our regulations, which would require it to be paved with a sidewalk. And yeah, as I said, this is just a concept plan at this point. Since the initial development of Havenwood Drive in the late 1980s, subdivision bylaw regulations have changed. The developed portion of Havenwood Drive is a public gravel road owned by the province. Under the current subdivision bylaw regulations, the proposed road extension will have to be a municipally owned paved road with a sidewalk. And if the application is approved, bylaw F100 local improvement charges bylaw could be used to pave the gravel road portion of Havenwood Drive. So that's this portion here. And that way it would prevent it to becoming another gap road issue. Policy analysis. So policy IM11 of the municipal planning strategy is a policy that permits council to consider the proposed mapping amendments. East Hants Council has to determine if the proposed application is the best interest of the municipality. The Municipal Department of Infrastructure and Operations has indicated that the lift station that services the current residents on Havenwood Drive will most likely have to be upgraded, and the developer has been made aware of this. The Shenectady Central Regional Center for Education projects that there could be a total student yield of 47 new students from the proposed development once built out. These projections do not exceed the capacity of the local schools. Under the current subdivision bylaw regulations, a maximum of 100 lots may be created on one road access to a collector or arterial road. The current regulations do not limit the number of dwelling units that may be constructed. Therefore, if approved, the applicant may construct all of the proposed dwelling units but may not subdivide all of the individual semi-detached buildings into semi-detached individual lots. Citizen engagements. So an advertisement outlining the application and indicating that it had been received and was under review by staff was placed in the Chronicle Herald. A public information meeting for the application was held on May 7th. The majority of residents who attended the PIM had concerns with flooding on Havenwood Drive. Residents along the street have already experienced flooding and are worried future development could make the existing issues worse. As mentioned at the meeting, if the application is approved, the applicant will have to prepare a stormwater management plan in accordance with our municipal standards. And although the developer is not required to fix the existing issues, they are not supposed to make the current situation any worse. Instead, pre and post stormwater flow should be balanced. And one of the other things that was mentioned was that the culvert going under the road into the CN rail line was overgrown. So I went out and it is fairly overgrown, but I'm not quite sure if that would help the resident situation. As you can see, they're located at the contours. This is contours from LiDAR that was taken over the last 4 or 5 years. And as you can see, Havenwood Drive is at a very low, it's at 20 meters. The land just in behind it here to the south is at 19. And all of this is much higher, and at the beginning of the road is much higher than the rest of Havenwood. So even if that culvert was cleaned out, I don't think it would help by allowing water to drain out of Havenwood Drive. Havenwood Drive is at a lower level than the surrounding areas, unfortunately. So this is just where we are in the process, first reading, and we've sent out the questionnaires to property owners, and we've sent out some requests for comments from our reviewing agencies. And the recommendation that Planning Advisory Committee recommends the council give first reading to the mapping amendments and authorize staff to schedule a public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Debbie. First up to speak, Warden Rolston.
Thank you. Just a question that's kind of spurred by this application, but not pertaining just only to it. The second requirement for the second exit. And I know we've requested a change to our bylaws to allow that to read per 100 units, not 100 lots. Where are we at in that process?
So you, Mr. Chair, we're going to be bringing a report forward hopefully in July with some different options for council's, for Planning Advisory Committee's consideration. And just in regards to the number of dwelling units on one access. But under the current regulations, the developer would be able to go ahead as is. However, if you change the regulations prior to getting in subdivision approval, they would have to abide by the new regulations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Next up to speak, Councilor McPhee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First thing there, I noticed that you said that at the meeting that it was people on Havenwood that were concerned with flooding, which is true, but there was also people there from Trunk 2 downstream that were concerned about the flooding of their properties. And that was one of the issues. And also, if you'd like, I'll meet with you there. I live about 38 seconds from the culvert that is causing the problem. It's the one underneath CN rail, and water lays level. And when the ditch is full up behind them, water has stopped running through the CN culvert, so it effectively acts as a dam now. So that's one of the problems with the flooding. I wouldn't take care of all of it, but
Yeah.
there's more than just the flooding issue on Havenwood itself. We need to think of the people that live downstream of that. As more water is caused to get there quicker by this new development, it's going to cause a backup of water because we're taking away some of the holding capacity of the land uphill.
Yeah. And I should note that, so I believe they're on this part of Highway 2, and that's at even lower than Havenwood. That's at 19 meters above sea level, that elevation. So that's why their backyards are flooding there, because it is just such a low point. As I mentioned, they have to, if the application is approved, they would have to do a stormwater management pond, and they may be required to put in not a stormwater management pond, a stormwater management plan, and as part of that, a pond may be required. Yeah. Yeah, and I have pictures of the CN that I've supplied
Yeah,
as well.
so you looked at that,
Yeah.
and it's definitely the water is low. There's water in the ditch all the way up through what used to be a brook up to Havenwood, and no water's running underneath or through that culvert, so it's acting as a dam. Yeah. Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Nobody left to, Counselor Green.
I would move the recommended motion.
It's been moved in second. Nobody on to speak. We'll go to the vote. Questions being called. Go to the vote. We're missing one. Okay, we found that one, and it's passed unanimously. Thank you, Debbie. Next item on the agenda is PLN 24001 Maple Tree Holdings, redesignation and rezoning. Final report. Rachel, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the zoning, the subject property is located along Highway 1 in Mount Uniacke. You can see the properties outlined in yellow on the map. The designation of zoning is currently regional commercial, RC, and you can see along Highway 1 to the north and the south, that's all regional commercial. Then to the rear of the property along Andrew Mitchell Drive is the business park zone. The land is currently vacant, although the developer has recently cleared the front portion of the lot to enable development. The property abuts the edge of Andrew Mitchell Drive in the Mount Uniacke Business Park, and you can see that just here where my cursor is. So the proposal is to redesignate and rezone the rear portion of the property to business park. The redesignation and rezoning will enable the property owner to construct buildings with a larger footprint than is permitted in the regional commercial zone, as the business park zone does not limit the footprint of buildings. The site plan submitted with the application suggests 3 buildings with a footprint of 5,165 square meters, and they're proposing multi-tenant small-scale units. The 2 rear buildings should be viewed as a concept only. So just while we're on this plan, and just to show you that this front portion has recently received site plan approval. So that's what the developer is looking for a building permit for right now. The development proposal is shown and should be considered a concept site plan as shown here on the presentation. If the application is approved, the developer or any future owner of the land will be able to develop the site in accordance with the land use bylaw regulations, which may or may not match the development shown on the concept plan. So there was a question about the driveway at the last meeting at council with regards to the site plan approval. Application was showing the linking of Andrew Mitchell Drive through to Highway 1. So I've just provided some information here. The front portion of the lot, which is being maintained with the regional commercial zoning, has recently been given site plan approval for the area identified as Phase 1. A concept for future Phase 2 and 3 was included on that site plan, but that site plan does not give any approval for those Phase 2 and 3 area. The site plan approval application was submitted prior to the rezoning and shows an old concept for Phase 2 and 3. So this here is the current concept for Phase 2 and 3, and it shows here the Phase 1, which is where the site plan approval has been given for, and there is no requirement for site plan approval on that back portion, and the development officer hasn't given any approval for layout on that back portion. Nova Scotia Public Works has given approval for the 2 driveways onto Highway 1 from the Phase 1 area, and the applicant would need to seek further approval from Public Works and the municipal engineer should they decide to link Phase 2 and 3 with Phase 1, creating a driveway from Andrew Mitchell Drive. However, the applicant has recently provided the following statement, saying that it's now physically impossible for any vehicle to cross over the lot because of the terrain and presence of 3 wetlands. Maple Tree also reiterates its no plans or intentions to link these roadways by a connecting driveway. And also, since the drafting of this presentation, the site plan approval plan has been, a note's been added to that approved plan, saying that the driveway for the site plan approval area will not be constructed all the way to the western edge of Phase 1 and will be reduced in length by 3 meters from what is identified on the approved site plan. And that's being initialed by both the development officer and the applicant. And what that means is that the driveway doesn't go to the very edge and essentially cuts it back by 3 meters. So the land use bylaw regulations, there's a table here on the presentation that shows the differences between the regional commercial and the business park zone. And the main one to point out in this presentation is that there is no maximum commercial floor area for the business park, but there is for the regional commercial zone, and that's the reason for this application. So just a comparison of some of the uses that are permitted in the regional commercial and or the business park. The full list is appended to the staff report. And SP means site plan approval and P means permitted as of right. And you can see there are some that are permitted in both zones and some that are permitted in either one or the other. So staff requested comments from internal departments and external agencies, which included the Municipal Department of Infrastructure and Operations and the Department of Public Works at the province. And Nova Scotia Public Works have no concerns. Our municipal engineer, roads and engineering staff provided comments. They've got no objection to the proposed rezoning. The applicant will require a road access permit for the driveway with Andrew Mitchell Drive. The applicant will have to explain how they manage the stormwater drainage at the proposed intersection. And the driveway shall be designed so it's clearly not an extension of Andrew Mitchell Drive. Council's decision on this application is not appealable to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board as it involves an amendment to the municipal plan and strategy. As part of the review process for this application, a public information meeting is required to hear input from the community. The PIN was held on April the 2nd, and notes taken at the PIN have been appended to the staff report. 65 questionnaires were mailed out and 5 questionnaires have been returned, and copies of these questionnaires have been scanned and made available for PAC today. 3 of the responses had no concerns or support, and 2 questionnaires provided comments with concerns. And the comments there are summarised on the presentation. Conclusion is that staff have completed the review of the proposal and to change the designation and zone of the portion of the property from regional commercial to business park. The proposed amendments have been evaluated using all applicable policies, and staff recommend approval of the application. You can see on the flow chart here that staff evaluation and the public hearing stage. This is the stage we're at right now, and the public hearing has been scheduled for next week. So the recommendation is that second reading and approval be given to the municipal plan and strategy amendments and the LUB amendments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. Recommendations on the screen. What is your wish? Councilor Green.
I'll move the recommended motion.
So move. And second? Looking for the question?
Question.
Question being called, we'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed unanimously. Next item on the agenda is PLN 24-005, Riverstone 214 Limited, Development Agreement Amendment. And Rachel, you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the land that's subject to this application has been zoned for commercial use for several years. Amendments were made to the regional commercial zone in 2016 to enable mixed-use developments on the 9 Mile River side of Highway 214. Approval was given in April 2020 by Council for a mixed-use development on the property in the regional commercial zone. That decision was appealed by local residents, but the appeal was not successful and the development agreement was signed and entered into in March 2021. The developer purchased the property with the approved development agreement in place. So the development agreement requires that at least 50% of the total ground floor area of all buildings be commercial, and at no point shall the total residential ground floor area surpass the combined commercial ground floor area, and that the single-story building is commercial and the ground floor of the 4-story building is commercial. And this means that the single-story commercial building and the 4-story mixed-use building have to be constructed before the 6-story building is completed. The developer has been constructing this single-story commercial building and the four-story mixed-use building, as these will provide all the total required ground floor area for the whole development. And the developer has indicated that despite active promotion for over a year, they haven't found tenants for the plaza, as they believe it's due to low demand for commercial floor area. So these are recent photographs taken of the two buildings that are currently under construction. This is the single-story commercial building, and you can just see here, this is the four-story mixed-use building. These elevation drawings show the four-story building, which is proposed to the front of the property or has been approved for the front of the property. And this six-story building is approved to be located behind that four-story building and adjacent to the 9 Mile River. This is the approved site plan, and it shows the single-story building. There's a driveway for that part of the property, and then a driveway shared by the six-story building to the rear and the four-story building up front. The subject property is outlined in yellow. Actually, it does also include, the development agreement includes this single-story building here, but the discussion really relates to the four-story building and the six-story building. The addresses are 411 and 427 Highway 214, and then the one behind that is not been given a civic number yet. The subject site and surrounding properties are zoned regional commercial, and a small portion of the rear of this property is zoned high-risk floodplain, but that's located over the edge of the bank down towards the 9 Mile River. You can see here aerial photography, and the building footprints have been overlaid, so you can see the location of those buildings. So the applicant has requested a substantial amendment to their development agreement dealing with two items. The first item is the relocation of the commercial activities. The applicant is applying to move commercial activities from this four-story building to the proposed six-story building. This adjustment will enable the conversion of the four-story building entirely to residential use. And to enable this change, the amendments to the development agreement will also include amendments to the approved external designs for both buildings, amendments to the parking allocation, and amendments to the common amenity area. The second request is introduction of short-term rentals to be included as a commercial use in a development agreement. And this, the developer has indicated that this will give greater flexibility to lease that commercial floor area. Further details of the request has been included in the staff report with the application letter added as Appendix B. So these are recent elevation drawings submitted with this current application, and the site plan remains mostly the same, just switching the labels over the two buildings. You can see here, this is the four-story building, and they've removed the commercial element on the ground floor and then added that to the six-story building. The policy goal for the regional commercial designation zone is to facilitate the development of a regional large-scale service-based commercial area with a wide range of retail goods and services and business uses in a land-intensive, vehicular-dependent environment. A regional scale commercial area will allow for a convenient shopping environment for East Hants residents and the travelling public, and for large-scale commercial with minimum impact to the built and natural environments. So this goal means that the regional commercial area zone, it's a commercial zone and not a mixed-use zone. However, policy ED24 does provide an exception to this by enabling some residential uses in areas adjacent to the 9 Mile River. And it's under this policy that the original property owner was able to negotiate a development agreement for the three buildings, or the three properties. So this is the policy in question, ED34, and I've highlighted by underlining the two sections that are under discussion. And it says that council shall consider mixed-use developments in the regional commercial designation, provided the requirements below, as well as requirements in the WCDD zone designation, are met. So the C is proposed residential uses should have frontage on the 9 Mile River, and F, proposed residential uses should be in the rear yard or above commercial uses. So this policy, therefore, says that the residential use buildings needs to be provided in the rear six-story building, as the four-story building does not have frontage on the 9 Mile River. and the proposed residential four-story building is not located in the rear yard or above commercial uses. And this is supported by the goal and intent of the policies of the regional commercial zone. The four-story building is currently under construction, and if the developer delays the construction of the six-story building or does not construct that, the development would not meet the requirements under policy ED34E, which is that the proposed commercial ground floor area must equal or surpass the residential ground floor. However, PAC and council may determine that as both policies ED34C and ED34F use the word should instead of shall or must, that there's enough flexibility in the wording of the policy to enable them to consider the application further. So the applicant is also requesting that short-term rentals be considered a commercial use. Short-term rentals are a residential use. They pay residential taxes and not commercial taxes. The rental units are permitted where residential units are permitted. Staff do not recommend enabling short-term rentals to be located in the commercial floor area, as they are essentially a residential use, and creating a definition to enable them does not change the nature of the use. There are other concerns with enabling an amendment to allow this use to be considered commercial, is that once the units are created, it would require some level of monitoring to make sure the units do not become full-time residential units. And enabling this change for this one location also sets a precedent that other developers or property owners may make similar requests for their commercial uses. Should PAC and council direct staff to continue processing this application, planning staff will comply with the citizen engagement policies of the municipal planning strategy. So to conclude, despite the challenges the developer is experiencing, the intent and goal of the regional commercial zone should not be compromised. The regional commercial area along Highway 214 has been identified commercial use for several years, and based on council's policies, it's recommended that changes to the development agreement not be made. However, alternatives have been identified for PAC and council, and you can see here on the diagram that we're at the initial consideration stage. So these are the alternatives that have been drafted. Direct staff to continue to process the development agreement application, which would include seeking comments from property owners, consult with stakeholders, and draft a development agreement for consideration with the final report. And then number 2, direct staff to begin the process of amending the MPS to remove the statement regarding where residential should be located on the property. This would still require the development agreement be amended, but would create criteria which would be more flexible for locating of commercial elements. The first step with this would be to schedule a public information meeting to talk to the community about the potential change to policy. So the recommendation is that the application by Riverstone 214 Limited for an amendment to an existing development agreement be refused. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. First up to speak. Councilor Garden-Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. So I did read this report at home. It was a lot, going in a lot of different directions. So just to simplify it, the initial, what their development agreement says now is that the 6-story building in the back does not have any commercial on it.
That's correct.
And the 4-story building in the front does.
That's correct.
They are having trouble getting anybody to secure the commercial space in the front.
That's correct, yeah.
So why would it be any different for the back? Why wouldn't it be?
I don't know the reasoning behind their wanting to switch. They have started construction on the 4-story building. I don't know whether the intent might be to complete construction on that, and then it enables them to lease to residential people. But I don't have any further information than that.
Okay, so that's my big question, is how would it be any different regardless of where the commercial was, front or back building? My second question is, when we put this into effect, the commercial on the bottom and the residential on the top, some time ago, it was under the understanding that there's a real demand for commercial space in this area. So I'm just wondering if that has changed, or is it dependent on the price that a developer is asking for the commercial space, or are we still having a demand for commercial space?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so I don't know I can't comment on the pricing of the commercial leasing space, but I did speak to our economic and development team about the need for commercial space, and they have provided me with some information. I'm just going to very quickly summarize that. So on the basis of current spending patterns measured against the current retail inventory, it's estimated that approximately 60% of retail sales outflow, so though they go out of the municipality, by creating a framework for retail opportunities in the community, the municipality can be in a better position to start minimizing that retail sales outflow. So by providing more retail space, it means that people within the community are more likely to spend their money in the community. Looking out to, so they also suggested that the current market demand would support over 400,000 square feet of retail space. And looking out to 2031, the market support and future demand is strong for more retail over the next decade. Bedford and Truro are the benefactors of East Kent's current lack of supply outflow, and the more opportunities there are to enhance the local retail offering, the more likely customers are to find options for spending. So I guess the summary there is that residents are leaving the community, and by providing more opportunities here, they're more likely to stay. They did also say, however, that the challenge with this is that the current market, new construction is being paused as market rates can't cover the high construction cost with interest rates. And however, there is a demand for professional retail space. It's extremely high across the country, with most markets seeking double-digit rental increases on renewal.
Okay, which is what we were kind of counting on when we came up with that stipulation in our policy. And my only other question is the short-term rentals. I know it was outlined, but basically short-term rental being commercial, residential.
Short-term rentals, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Short-term rentals are like your Airbnb, your retail, your rental spaces where you go and rent a house from someone. Essentially, they're considered residential use, so they pay residential taxes and not considered a commercial use.
So then it's residential. Short-term rentals is basically residential.
That's what they are, but the developer is asking for that to be included in the development agreement as being considered a commercial use.
Because it brings in money? Just wondering how that could be construed as commercial.
They're asking for that to be considered commercial, so, which would mean that under the development agreement, they could then lease that commercial area as short-term rentals instead of a commercial use.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up to speak, Warden Rolston.
Thank you. Councillor Garden Cole addressed one or two questions that I had. When this was initially approved, there was a lot of negotiation back and forth and a lot of discussion. And I do believe that council at that time was as flexible as possible in establishing where the location of the commercial spaces should be. And I think it was a fair negotiation. And at the end of the day, the development agreement was approved, although not unanimously at that time. Every sympathy with developers out there in today's market conditions. But at the end of the day, this was an approved development agreement on a property when the developer purchased it. And the terms were very clear at that time. And I have not to date heard anything that would cause me to be interested in changing those terms. So having said that, I'm going to move the recommended motion.
Moved in second. On before the motion, Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to add up on Councillor Garden Cole, the short term, they're gonna be moving to the second building or? or stay in the first building, like the four-story building, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the request, it's two parts to the request. The request is, I'll just bring up the site plan. So the request is to move, there's commercial ground floor requirements in this building. The request is to move it to the six-story building, and then this just be residential. The second request is for short-term rentals to be considered commercial, which would essentially allow them to have short-term rentals on the ground floor of the six-story building, but it could also feasibly allow them to have short-term rentals on the one-story building. It's not clear from the request whether it just relates to the six-story building, that request for short-term rentals, but it would mean that if approval was given, that this would be purely residential, and this would be commercial on the ground floor with the ability to have short-term residential units.
Okay, and the tax, they're gonna pay commercial tax on those two, or residential?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's residential taxes for short-term
everything,
rentals.
For everything, so, okay. Well, I know everybody want to stick with the development agreement, but I could see it differently because we have shortage, and we just got a big incentive from the government, federal government, to allow for more residential because we're very short on residential units. And I would think for the environment, it's better to have less parking spot along the 9 Mile River, close to that area. And you have one stream going to river on one side and the river in the back. So I think it's a small compromise to give for, first of all, saving the environment. Second of all, like have some more residential accessible area for, especially on the first floor, to have it for seniors or something like that. That's the way I see it, but probably other councilors see it differently. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Warden Rolston.
Thank you. I just want to make note that East Hants has more approvals in the queue for residential units. I think we are above and beyond our requirements under the Housing Accelerator funding, and we continue to grow at an unprecedented rate. So there is, the development community in East Hants and East Hants in general is performing very well in adding additional housing units. And the addition of all these additional housing units is going to mean the addition of families and people who are going to need commercial services, be it retail services, be it professional services of some type. They're going to need these. And that's why the zones that we have were designed the way they were, to encourage supportive development for these families and these residential units while providing needed commercial areas within a reasonable distance, and also to assist with our imbalance between the commercial and residential tax rate. With all due respect, I don't believe that it's an unreasonable ask to expect the developer to uphold the development agreement that was in place when the development was purchased. And I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Councilor Musa.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with you, Warden, and history have proved, so also East Hants, that in a mixed-use area where everything is accessible by foot and by walking, and it's walking distance, we compromise and we made it like commercial ready, and we're living with it, so it could be commercial, and I can see why not we can do something like that here, because to have commercial and nobody's gonna use it, it doesn't make it any, it's not gonna make the development happen. I know it's a problem, not our problem, it's developer problem for not having, probably doing a study on what needed on that road, but if you have like a single story and it's hard to rent, so how you gonna rent both? I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Questions being called? Nobody left to speak, we'll go to the vote. We're voting to refuse. And the motion has passed with Counselor Eli Musa voting nay. Thank you, Rachel. Next item on the agenda is UNIAC Secondary Planning Strategy, Transportation Background Report. Debbie, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as part of the secondary planning strategy, staff have undertaken a review of transportation in the UNIAC area, and we've used those survey results to come up with some options. So sidewalks were the most requested community improvement identified in the UNIAC Secondary Planning Strategy Survey responses. It was mentioned in regards to safety, connectivity, trails, community improvement, and more. In response, municipal infrastructure and operations staff have prepared sidewalk cost options for councilors' consideration, which are discussed further in this report. According to the survey results, approximately 67% of respondents commute out of the study area for work, and nearly 34% of survey respondents were around the age of retirement or greater. It's not surprising that the respondents indicated that they were interested in having opportunities for transit that connected into HRM. Other comments about commuting included ensuring the road networks were well maintained and cleared of snow. Many respondents commented about the intersection at Highway 1, the Irving, and Highway 101 interchange and concerns around safety. And I did reach out to RCMP, and they indicated that between 2020 and 2023, there were 10 accidents reported at that intersection. And we realized that 2020, there probably wasn't much traffic due to the pandemic, but we can look at it again at a future time. Planning staff have spoken to Nova Scotia Public Works about resident safety concerns, and they were aware of the safety issues. However, Nova Scotia Public Works does not currently have plans for improvements at that intersection. However, they said that they did indicate that this intersection could be a potential candidate for improvements in a future year. Basically, there's probably other projects that they have to get done first before they start looking at this particular intersection. Other transportation-related comments included having another interchange to access Highway 101, reduced speeds, more police presence for rush hour traffic, better painted lines on the road, better winter maintenance, bike routes, and internet for residents who work at home. Sidewalks. So, as I mentioned, sidewalks were identified by respondents numerous times throughout the survey. To develop a traditional community center, sidewalks are required to allow for connectivity and to allow pedestrians to safely access amenities in the community. Constructing sidewalks along Highway 1 would also increase accessibility for the community. Seniors from the Parkview Manor would be able to walk from their apartments to the sidewalk, and the sidewalks would also allow for wheelchair and stroller access. Infrastructure and operations have completed an estimated cost for the construction of a sidewalk along Highway 1. So, basically, Phase A, that would be Parkview Manor to the UNIAC School, is $2.9 million approximately. Phase B, UNIAC School to Pence Lake Drive, $2 million, and Phase C, Pence Lake Drive to Etta Road, is $2.5 million. And staff are recommending that funding for Phase A is explored. And we have, Logan did up some wonderful images here for us. So this would be Phase A, and then as this shows here, there's sidewalk on the Parkview Manor side of Highway 1, and then there's at the crosswalk, it changes over, and the sidewalk is then on the other side of Highway 1 going all the way down to the school. So that's Phase A. Phase B goes from the school all the way down and just past Pence Lake Drive. And then Phase C, Pence Lake Drive to Etta Road. So the total cost of construction for 2024 is nearly $7.5 million. The total cost of construction in 2015, when the estimates were done, was $2.5 million. So we know that inflation has had increased dramatically over the past decade. But it's also important to consider other issues, such as changes to the scope of the project. So the original estimate was for a 1.2 meter wide asphalt sidewalk, while the municipality's current standards a 1.8 meter concrete sidewalk. The initial estimate didn't include storm water infrastructure, and that has been added. And the sidewalk now extends to Parkview Manor and includes those flashing crosswalk lights there, so it added 210 meters to the total length of the sidewalk. Staff recommend the PAC authorize staff to explore how the construction of Phase A sidewalk could be funded. And Mount Uniacke does have money from the Canadian Community Build Fund set aside. Proposed road connections map, as mentioned as part of the commercial background report, staff have recommended that a required future transportation connection map for the Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy Study area be added to the subdivision bylaw. Planning staff have drafted the map for PAC's review and are recommending that the draft map be added to the draft planning strategy. And I will note that our GIS staff were out of the office last week, so I wasn't able to get them to fix it, but this green line would come down so it doesn't just float there at the end. It would connect into the other parts of the green line. Transit. Transit opportunities are one of the items mentioned in the Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy Survey results. Respondents mentioned having both transit run through the community and having transit stop by the Highway 1 and 101 interchange that could connect into Halifax transit routes at the Sackville Terminal. Transit is expensive, but it does provide benefits to the community. It can save residents money. It provides opportunities to those without a vehicle or a reliable vehicle. It reduces greenhouse gases and keeps extra cars off the road, and it provides opportunities to connect with other communities and opens employment opportunities to the young or underemployed. Staff recommend adding a project to Section E3, Municipal Projects and Studies of the Municipal Planning Strategy to complete a transit feasibility study for the Mount Uniacke area. So that's just a list of studies that we have in our municipal planning strategy, and every once in a while we add things to it, and every once in a while we actually complete one of the projects and remove it. So this would just be to add a transit feasibility study for the Mount Uniacke area to that part of the municipal planning strategy. The Joint Regional Transportation Agency, JRTA, is a provincial crown corporation reporting to the Provincial Minister of Public Works. JRTA is working on a regional transportation plan. The plan is supposed to establish a long-term coordinated vision for a regional transportation system that makes sustainable growth and development possible, play a critical role in advancing broader provincial government initiatives to tackle climate change, support growth and economic development, and improve health, well-being, and quality of life in Nova Scotians. The plan is anticipated to be completed in November of 2024 and will include both shorter and long-term actions looking at the next 20 years and beyond. East Hants can support the plan by adding policies to our municipal planning strategy that support opportunities for the development of transit through the Mount Uniacke study area. And therefore, staff suggests a policy be added to Section C1, Growth Management and Infrastructure of the Municipal Planning Strategy that supports transit through the community to Halifax. So recommendations for the draft report. One, recommend that a transit feasibility study for the Mount Uniacke area be added to Section E3, Municipal Projects and Studies of the Municipal Planning Strategy. 2, recommend that a policy be added to Section C1, Growth Management and Infrastructure of the Municipal Planning Strategy, supporting the future development of transit through the community. And 3, recommend that the subdivision bylaw be amended by adding the draft required future transportation connection map for Mount Uniacke. And 4, recommend the council authorize staff to explore funding options for Phase A, Parkview Manor to Uniacke School Sidewalk. And the recommendation is to include these recommendations that I've just went through in the Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy Transportation Report in the draft Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy Report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Libby. First up to speak, Councillor McPhee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to staff. In the Phase 1 there at Parkview Manor, is that a mid-block crosswalk that's proposed?
I believe that crosswalk is already in place, actually.
Oh, is there?
Yeah. And so I think it's not there? Oh, it's moved along. I guess it's actually along here a little bit farther. So it'll be moving the location of the crosswalk. So there is a crosswalk along Highway 1. It would be moving it back towards Parkview Manor so that the seniors could access the sidewalk and then get across the road to, there's I think it's a Guardian, a pharmacy here anyways, and then the coffee shop.
So how did we get a mid-block crosswalk approved?
That's a good question. And I will,
I'll go to the director for his comments.
Through Mr. Chair, the answer is we did not get a crosswalk approved. It's actually currently at the driveway. It's a seniors complex. In today's world, it's there. It magically appeared. There was no municipal involvement. And if the municipality were to request for an assessment, the province would take it out. And unofficially, we've been advised not to ask. And that's why it's there, straight up.
Yep, makes sense.
And so what staff are proposing is an improvement to alignment to a crosswalk, adding safe destinations, proper signage and sight lines that would meet the requirements of a proper sidewalk and crossing.
Yes.
And that would be a drastic improvement and something we're proposing elsewhere with the province currently. And it would be multi-purpose use because the location would be improved. It would have better access to the fire hall, which is a community space. It would have better access and direct access to the park and not just serve the seniors dwelling, but still serve the seniors dwelling, which is critical because those folks need access to the pharmacy across the street. There's a coffee shop across the street and a post office. And so for those residents, they have lower mobility challenges, and it's just maintaining that quality of life for them. So that's the concept of the slight change and the quirky history of why there's a crosswalk there.
So would we, if we try to move it, or Public Works now sees this, are they going to, are we putting it in jeopardy? I mean, I guess you can't really, that's foreseeing the future, I guess, yeah.
Through Mr. Chair, we can't comment on what the province may do.
Right. And you said signage, what type of signage? Light,
So through Mr. Chair, we would look for a RFB, rectangular rapid flashing beacon setup with signage on each side showing the crosswalk, and then your approach signage leading up to the crosswalk. And then anything else required within like a tax standard, Transportation Association of Canada, we'd abide by that. We'd take a look and validate due diligence in the design. We'd actually ask that to be a design criteria in the RFP to make sure that all design criteria meets traffic design requirements as per Nova Scotia.
yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you, staff, for the explanation. Next up to speak, Counselor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can elaborate a little bit more about that crosswalk. That's been there for well over 30 years. And actually, Public Works did try to remove it here a short time ago, and the MLA stepped in to say it's been there for that long. It's always been there. And it's rather funny because the running joke was the Uniacke Manor now is considered a dual use. There's low-income housing on the upper floor, and it's seniors housing on the bottom floor. Because there is no elevator, they can't have senior housing on a second floor. But right across from that building, historically years ago, was Bernard's crematorium and funeral home. So it was literally, when it was all seniors housing, the only crosswalk in the community went directly across to the funeral home. That was kind of a running joke for a number of years. Understand, like many residents want a crosswalk. That's a lot of money. There's also, right next to the manor is the Memorial Park. So just wondering why the sidewalk didn't continue down, or at least create an access point from the edge of the manor into the Memorial Park. So you now have access to come out of the park, go along the sidewalk and cross, rather than having to go. That property there that you're touching is the Memorial Park, Municipal Park. And it stops before that. So that might be something to possibly look at, having a connection to the park. That's something there. The other thing with this is there is no equipment to snow clear or maintain this located anywhere within the region. So you're looking at a contracted service, or you're looking at building I&O infrastructure, placing equipment there, hiring people to work to clear that sidewalk. And what's the cost associated with that? That's the question that's not in this report, right? It's not just a 7.5 million to get it built, which if you look at the number of homes, that's an awful lot of money for a short number of homes to pay, because I know I can't expect my residents who live 15 to 20 kilometers away to be paying for a sidewalk that they don't use. They have no children, or anything like that. It's not feasible to charge everybody for that. Now it does connect to a large subdivision and a couple other tertiary roads that would have a benefit to have that. But a large portion of the community, there is no benefit for the sidewalk there. There's an overall benefit for the community, but there's no personal benefit for them, which means making them pay for it would, in my mind, be very difficult. The other thing is it's a provincial highway. Does the province allow this to be done? Because this road was supposed to have the blue route. It was repaved 2 years ago, and it was scheduled to have the blue route going through there because the number one highway was supposed to have the blue route running all the way down. And they didn't add the blue route in. They did a paved shoulder, but they couldn't actually make it an official bike lane because they didn't excavate or move the ditch over to accommodate having that widen the road. They changed the scope of the project after the contract was awarded. And I talked to our previous MLA about that through quite a bit of why that was done. And she looked into it and never got an answer, and then there was an election and everything changed. I think Debbie has an answer for me.
Go ahead, Debbie.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did actually meet with Nova Scotia Public Works about this, and just to give them, see if there was any glaring issues with proposing such a sidewalk. And they said as long as it fit within the road right away, and that they would take a look at it.
Yeah, so it's not just laying a sidewalk, because there's not enough room to put a 1.8 meter sidewalk there. You're moving ditches, you're moving
Yes.
driveways.
Yeah,
It's
and they have to deal with stormwater as well.
stormwater,
That's-
and
And-
it's a lot more work than what it looks like.
But the stormwater was included within the pricing that Logan had worked out. He included, storm infrastructure had been added that was not included in the previous estimate.
Okay, it's just, I see that number becoming a lot greater once things hit the ground. The other thing, you mentioned the Joint Transportation Agency. I would like to make it very clear, the residents of Mount Uniacke do not want commuter rail taking them to Windsor Junction when a 7-minute car ride gets them to the bus terminal and they can get the links directly downtown. They would actually be traveling further away from doing anything. The rail line runs right through the middle of the community, and especially across the back of the school where children play and move through. So when the train stopped running, a lot of the people in the community celebrated, because there was many instances where trains hit cars at the multiple crossings, going from the number 1 to the East Uniacke to South Uniacke. Children were hit by trains, right? Because they were using the train corridor to traverse to get from the other parts of the municipality down towards the school. And that's why for the last number of years, and actually at great expense, council has supported it, trying to get that made from a rails to trail. And I'll say this right now, I personally believe there's somebody on that committee in the Department of Public Works at the bureaucrat level that HRM got rid of commuter rail. They stopped all the rail lines going downtown. So when they did that, there is no option for commuter rail to go into the city. You have to go outside the city and then take a bus into the city. So I just want to make sure whatever we do, whatever report, and whoever's on that committee, it's clear that commuter rail is not wanted by the community. We'll take busing to get to the other bus stop, and that would be great. It ran many years, but the commuter rail would not really link a lot of the areas that they're looking for. And even the people I know, speaking to councils in West Hants, the people of Windsor and that aren't really interested in it either, because it's taking them further away from Halifax, because you're literally going the opposite direction. That is something that I really want to make clear that, you know, if Halifax, if HRM had not decided to kill commuter rail to downtown, then yes, it would make a great option. But they have.
Through you, Mr. Chair, they're probably looking at rapid transit, like the buses, the rapid buses going through communities and stuff like that, rather than commuter rail, because as you said, the expense related to that would, so it's more the,
There's been plenty of correspondence from the Department of Public Works about mentioning the GTA, and every time we've asked about what's holding up the process. And the GTA has been in the last 3 messages we've gotten from the Department of Public Works and the Minister's Office. So I firmly believe, and in talking to other people in other municipalities, they're starting to have the same idea, that there's something going on there, and that we need to have a clear voice that that is not what we're looking for. As far as a solution is commuter rail, because number one, the whole rail line there, the bridges are all broken. Like it would be an enormous expense to begin with. And now you're going to have these trains running behind the schools again and through residential areas as it's growing, that for the last 30 years there has been none. So it's definitely something that I would like to see. Anything that we highlight or anything we send out of here, make that known that that's not what we're looking for. But as you say, Debbie, rapid transit, some sort of exchange like we talked about before with the airport and things like that, getting a whole regional concept of that type of transit, whether it's electric buses, hybrid buses, or anything like that, all for that. The 2 reasons why it failed before was there wasn't enough ridership. I mean, they used to pick everybody up at the carpool parking lot. And I know there's a lot of people now who drive to Sackville and they get in the terminal and they take the link downtown. And it's not just 1 or 2, it's quite a few. And people carpool to that. So if they're looking for ways that people are using mass transit, they are. There was also supposed to be a secondary terminal made at the new exit by there that still has not been put in. So there's a whole bunch of other things. I just don't want to see something like we talk about connectivity. That trail would connect the entire community and would connect all those communities for various forms of recreation and in a safe manner away from traffic, because we still have to deal with the quarries in the center of the community running large trucks down that same road. So now you're going to bracket the kids by having large trucks and trains on both sides, running down the number 1 and in behind. So it's one of the things that I don't even think it's a unique situation, but when something hasn't been there for years, like when I grew up, the train ran behind my house, right? And you'd hear it all hours of the night going. But that hasn't been for 30 years. And so nobody's used to that. So it's a whole other thing to look at. The other thing I'd like to see in the report is the long-term costing for maintenance, snow clearing, and the infrastructure required to service any sidewalks put in the Mount Uniacke area, because that's going to add numbers to this.
through you, Mr. Chair, that would be to explore funding options, so it's not to do the sidewalk, it's just giving us authorization to then go back and to look at how it would be funded, and they would probably take that into consideration as well. We haven't looked at anything like that, it was just coming up with the numbers about what the approximate costs are to date.
Yeah, before we even look at where the money's going to come from, like if the number is out of reach, why waste the time looking for money when you can just say that it's too expensive, right? Because when you look at the CCRB, that's a whole other thing that hasn't been looked at for 20 years, right? The Canadian Building Fund, how that's divvied up in the municipality, because it used to be called the gas tax and it had more restrictions, and that money was divided a certain way. And since it's changed and the restrictions have been taken off, I don't think we've revisited how that money is allocated to the municipality, have we?
I'm not sure. I'll have to ask the CAO.
Okay, I'm gonna skip around here to get some of these answers completed. Yeah, I'm gonna, Council Perry, I'll turn you on for now. CAO, you're,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So through you to Councillor Perry, that is really part of the question. So in order to, so this is the initial high level, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Are you even contemplating that? And then if you said, yeah, you know what, we want to go forward and take a look, that recommendation would then be to, okay, so this is the capital work. What are the operating costs, and what would an area rate need to be without any funding if you were just going to pay for it all through area rate? And then you do have reserves in place in Mount Uniacke, so maybe some scenarios on, well, if you use half of that reserve for sidewalks, if you want to save half for something else, give you some scenarios on how that looks. And I think from an area rate perspective, you do need to look at different scenarios in that same report with, you know, these are the people that are directly affected, but then there's a bunch of people that are peripherally affected as well. So are they going to contribute? So a couple of different scenarios to get you comfortable with what that area rate looks like for sidewalks. If you're going to mimic what we've done in other areas of the municipality, that's kind of the process they went through. If the initial number of 7.4 million is just a hard no, you know, I think that's where we stop. But the next step would be to dive into what does that area rate look like? Because funding is only a part of it. Long-term covering the cost of the service, you need to understand what that looks like in the long term. So that report would be quite extensive, looking at the 3 different phases, the debt related to each one, how you save for some of those potentially, and then what that cost looks like to maintain. We've had significant difficulties in the past getting contracts for smaller services in Mount Uniacke in particular. So that has to be a factor. That's a risk factor for the municipality. So if we can't get contracted services, then what happens to your level of service for your sidewalks in that case? Do you just have summer sidewalks? Or do you have the public works building with the, you know, with employees? You know, we don't have winter employees who do contracts right now. So do we then get into that level? And we need to be able to cost some of that out at a high level and understand your risk down the line, because that would all be borne by Mount Uniacke residents trying to maintain those sidewalks. So that is that next report. It's a big one that will take sort of multi-departmental inputs, but it's the next natural phase. And this report just recommends, if you want to go ahead with that, to put that into the strategy.
This wouldn't be recommending phase A, not the entire thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Council Perry, you're back on.
It's just, when I look at the cost, 2.9 million, I think my residents would rather see 2.9 million go into a community center facility over a 1 kilometer sidewalk. Because that facility would have a larger footprint, it would have a larger impact on the community for all residents within the boundaries of the districts, rather than just those that live in a close proximity to this area. So I can fully say, you can keep what you've done in the report, but I wouldn't waste any more staff's time digging deeper on a sidewalk when we're looking at 2.9 million plus, because I do believe once a sidewalk's in, you have a legal responsibility to have it cleared at the same standard and the same speed as the roads. So I don't even believe if we were on a no next to provincial highway, we would even have the option to say it's a summer sidewalk and not used in the wintertime when kids are expected to walk on it to go to school in the winter. So it would have to be cleared. So you're looking at a massive cost. So I wouldn't want to waste any more staff's time digging into the sidewalk issue, because it's going to be, literally, it's too expensive currently for the population that's there. And I'll let the counterpart from Mount Uniacke speak, but that would be my 2 cents. Would be, I wouldn't go any further with the sidewalk. It's great to have those numbers in the report so people can see what it's going to cost, but I do think down the road we do have to have a talk about how that Canadian Community Building Fund is divvied up, because the way it was originally split It was split that way because it could only be used for certain things. Now that that money can be used for more things, I'd like to see just how that's split and how it's being divided and where it's going. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. You're still on.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the Canada Building Fund is actually under renegotiation right now. So I wouldn't recommend you have that conversation now. I would recommend you wait until the new agreement comes in play because the one we have is actually expired. So I'm anticipating that for at least some communities, and we may not fall into it, the size of the community will matter and it will probably be tied more to housing than it has been in the past. That's what I'm hearing. So I would recommend if you want to have that conversation, you at least wait until the new agreement's in place and we know what we're dealing with.
Oh, I'm fine with that, because I know it was originally tied to population, and all the districts had equal population dependent upon the density, right? Like, the same number of people are in the same number of places in each district, so if it was tied by population, then literally it should have been divided equally amongst the districts. But I know before, because of the restrictions on it, there was areas that had no services that basically we put the money to where it could be used, because that was the best for the whole municipality.
I don't recall that breakdown, but once it could be used, they added some other additional items, maybe around 2018, 17. We did the split that we have based on, it was a different formula. It wasn't related to where it can be used. It was just it can be used now for recreation facilities and that type of thing. So that's when that split, I think.
And with the new agreement coming, there'll be new restrictions, so
Yeah.
I think that'd be a good time to look at that and review that when the new agreement's signed. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Perry. Thank you, CAO. Thank you, Counselor Moose, for being patient.
Oh, no problem. Thank you,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair. Well, I don't agree with anything Councilor Perry said anyway. No, actually, he covered everything, but my question is it normal to put sidewalk when we are gonna do a study for sewer and water? So I think we're putting the cart before the horse here, Jesse, I don't know.
I'll go to the director since he has an answer.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it depends. They don't have to happen in the same order. I think doing one before the other does impact some design criteria, but from a sewer standpoint, if you want to stay away from a pre-existing sidewalk, you just go on the other side of the street. You know, like that, and cutting across pre-existing infrastructure, that's just kind of
So they
the
don't
cost of doing business, and we do that on a fairly frequent.
So they don't
basis.
have to be on the same side?
They don't have to be
No,
on the same
they
side.
don't have to be on the same. Okay, and about the cost and who's gonna pay for, I don't expect any of my residents that are like so far away from it to pay for it. Plus, we're talking about the reserve we have, but we didn't talk about what it's been building for. Like, we're building those reserve for 6-7 years now because people want community centers, they want splash pad, which is on our strategic plan and happened everywhere except Mount Uniac, and so many things. They want another baseball field to be able to play baseball on a full field. Like, there's lots of stuff that need to be that could be used by everyone, from a 5-year-old kid to a 90-year-old man or woman. And we've been saving for that, and to see everything going for a sidewalk that might not be used, like, from Mount Uniac, we have a lot of trails. People who want to walk, they go walk on a trail. So it's only going to be used probably by the school kids to go to the grocery store, and I don't think it's feasible to pay like $7 million for that. While I like to see, like, there's a lot in the study for Mount Uniac plan, like, there's a lot of people that want senior apartment for seniors, like small multiplexes, and that's the area where we put in the sidewalk is. It's gonna be there, but we need infrastructure before that, so we should invest in infrastructure that generate money first, then a sidewalk that is gonna be just the cost. You're not gonna gain anything from a sidewalk, but if you invest in sewer and water, then you can have more tax base that, I'm not gonna say, you're gonna be rich from it, but it makes sense. It brings more taxes to the area, and then we could be looking at sidewalk then. And I'm on the same page as Councilor Perry, so.
Thank you, Counselor. We have a motion. We have a mover or seconder, or where are we? Counselor Perry.
So with the direction that we've given, those items that we don't want to waste staff's time on, if this motion is moved, would we say we remove number 4 or with amendments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, you'd have to tell me what you would exactly want removed or changed from these 4 items.
There's one other thing. If you go back to the map of connectivity, you have, if you look, it's hard, the top right-hand corner, where you have, I believe it's Joffrey Drive connected to Beamish Road.
Yes,
There's also another connection that connects that same road all the way to Uniacke Mines Road,
yes.
right? Now that would connect, from Highway 1 to East Uniacke Road. There is a road, it's a provincial road that connects through there. Not saying it has to be, but I just want to make sure you were aware that road connection was there because it wasn't shown on the maps here, because with some future developments that are being talked about happening north of Coxcomb Lake, they would be then restricted with the one access in and out because there's no connectivity off of Uniacke Mines Road other than a single way in and out until you get down to a certain point. So I do know, in speaking to one of the landowners there, what's stopping him is the fact that he has a hard time trying to put a subdivision in next to an active rock quarry. So, but just so that's on the radar. But if I could go back to the things at the bottom, I would move the recommended motion with the amendment to remove number 4 from the recommendations for the draft report, as well as highlighting the desire for rapid transit, not light rail.
Second.
It's moved in second. Staff, you have that?
Question.
Question on the amendment?
No, the motion wasn't made, it's just a motion.
Question on the motion?
Question.
And the amendment has passed unanimously? The motion has passed unanimously. Let's continue to move on. Okay. Thank you, Counselor. The last one for planning advisory today is Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy, Housing Background Report. Debbie, you can begin when you're ready. Feel free to leave when you're ready. See you next week.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as part of the UNIAC secondary planning strategy, staff have undertaken a review of housing in the UNIAC area. Staff have developed a map showing the study area, current housing, approved developments, significant topographical information, and other details for Planning Advisory Committee's information. And as I said, there's a lot of information on this map. The first is the study outline area, which is shown in yellow. The red is the Mount Uniacke Growth Management Area. We have the wetlands identified on the plan, water bodies identified on the plan. We have both the Pockwalk watershed and the Sackville Rivers watershed identified here. Also shown is areas where there is current development. So those are existing homes and lots, and that's in the dark gray. The schools here. The light gray is proposed or stuff currently under construction. So we've had the rezonings on East Uniacke Road, the rezoning in South Uniacke, plans of subdivision for around Westlake and for Moonlight Drive here. So some other information we have is the lands owned by the province. So that's the Uniacke House Estates. So the province owns a parcel here, and Bell Park, and then Halifax water property is identified in the dark blue. We've also identified our parklands on the map. So those are shown here, and there's a large parkland up here, and then on South Uniacke Road. Our map also shows some other interesting information, some pits and mines. So these were either active or formerly active pits and quarry areas with the little hammer and axe. Or pick, I mean. And then we have abandoned mine openings in the circles. And there's a lot that was around the park and South Uniacke Road there. And also that road owned by the province that connects Uniacke Mines Road to around where Beamish is. That has quite a few abandoned mine pits there as well. So that just gives some context of the area that we're looking at for development. So the majority of residential properties in the UNIAC secondary planning strategy study area are either zoned established residential neighborhood R1, 2 dwelling unit R2, or lakeshore residential LR. There's a small amount of land zoned country residential CR, and large areas of mostly undeveloped land zoned rural use. Currently, the only area that permits multiple unit development as of right through site plan approval is the Village Core VC zone, and the Village Core zone allows the development of between 8 and 12 dwelling units with on-site services. Parkview Manor is the only building with more than 2 dwelling units in it in the Village Core zone. Legally conforming existing single-unit dwellings in the study area are permitted to have an accessory dwelling unit in accordance with the land use bylaw regulations. In the rural use RU zone, property owners may apply for a development agreement to permit the construction of a maximum of 8 dwelling units. The other zone in the UNIAC secondary planning strategy study area that permits a denser development pattern is the mini-home MH zone. Valley Gate Park has 175 mini homes, and the park provides its own public water supply and sewage treatment facility, which are both regulated by Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change. So survey response, we did ask the community what they would like to see in the form of new housing, and results of the UNIAC secondary planning strategy survey show that single unit dwelling homes are still the preferred housing form in the community. Of the other types of housing identified, small multiplexes were the second most preferred housing form, with just over 10% of the respondents indicating that they preferred this style of housing. And the least popular form of housing, at 1.55% of the respondents, are larger apartment buildings around 24 units. Under the category Other, many respondents indicated that they didn't want any new housing or indicated that they would like a single-level senior housing. The respondents also indicated that both affordable housing and seniors housing were needed for different stages of life, and some seniors wanted to be able to downsize from their current homes and find a smaller home in a rental in their community. Water and wastewater services. So policy GM17 of the Municipal Planning Strategy states that council shall consider the provision of municipal water and wastewater infrastructure only when the development density within the Mount Uniacke Growth Management Area dictates the need and it is in the financial capabilities of the municipality to do so. A feasibility study shall be conducted by a qualified professional to determine the financial and environmental impacts of installing municipal services when council determines that municipal water and wastewater infrastructure should be considered and evaluated for the Mount Uniacke Growth Management Area. So, given the current development interest in Mount Uniacke, Council may want to consider conducting a feasibility study for the installation of municipal services in Mount Uniacke and recommend that it be added to the draft 2026-2027 budget and be included in the new strategic plan. So, it'd be in the plan, and it would just be a feasibility study. So, it's looking at what the cost would be and where those services would, like you'd locate lagoons and how the treatment would be. Mount Uniacke acts as a bedroom community to Halifax, and the population in the area has steadily increased over each census period. Even if municipal services are not warranted at this time, the study results would help staff to plan development patterns that would support future servicing, allowing land use development to take place in a pattern that would best allow it to be serviced at a future date. Until there are municipal services located in Mount Uniacke area, will be continued to be developed using on-site services. To help support growth in the Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy Study area, staff are in the process of finding a professional to prepare a Level 1 hydrogeological assessment of groundwater in the Uniacke study area. Results of the study will be included in the draft Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy report and will ultimately be used to help future homeowners, developers, and council in their decision-making for both water quality and quantity. Staff are not recommending larger apartment buildings to be considered for on-site services at this time. After speaking with staff at Halifax, we have concerns about larger disposal systems that could use local lakes for the effluent disposal and about what happens if larger disposal systems fail. Instead, staff suggest waiting for the results of the municipal servicing study and assess other options at that time. Proposed zoning changes. So planning staff are proposing zoning changes for Mount Uniacke to help create a traditional neighborhood center. As per the feedback from the Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy Survey, staff are recommending gentle density options that would supply the aging population and young people with rental housing while ensuring the properties could be serviced with on-site services. Traditional neighborhoods emphasize walkability within a compact and interconnected layout. Staff recommend amending the townhouse R2T designation and zone to add a category for on-site services in Mount Uniacke. The location of the new R2T zone would be based on the results of the hydrogeological study. There's no sense putting in an R2T zone if there's no water there to support the development. The townhouse R2T zone allows for both townhouses and small multiplex developments. Lot sizes will have to be large enough to accommodate on-site services, parking, and amenity space. If at a future date the municipality decides to provide municipal services to Mount Uniacke, staff would recommend revisiting the land use regulations and look for other opportunities to increase density at that time. So also, as part of the Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy process, we've been contacted by Fathom Studio on behalf of their clients who own property in the Uniacke area, and they are requested mapping amendments for their land identified as PID 451-36272. A comprehensive draft concept plan and project proposal have been prepared by Fathom to demonstrate their request. The first request is to increase the depth of the Lakeshore Residential LR designation and zone along Coxcomb Lake Drive, which would permit the subdivision of new lots on the east side of the road. New lots could only be subdivided once a second access to the area is provided. So again, it was just taking the Lakeshore Residential zone that was already there, making it a little bit wider so that once a second access is constructed, they could then continue with subdivision of the off the Coxcomb Lake Drive and allow them to create more units along there. Fathom's Studio's second request is to redesignate and rezone the remaining lands to Walkable Comprehensive Development District. The subject property is 363 hectares, nearly 900 acres. In the past, the WCDD zone has only been applied to properties with existing serviceable boundary. However, the applicant has presented staff with a development option that could provide 3,953 dwelling units to Mount Uniacke in a variety of housing forms if the property was serviced with central services. If the property didn't have central services, only a limited number of lots could potentially be created. So it would be a situation, for example, that they would come up with the central service, how it would service, and then through the regulations, we would look at whether there was options there for how that would be served, like whether that would fit council's requirements. And again, we would keep intact the watercourse greenbelt zone or along the brook there, and the rest of it will be WCDD zone. So below is a list of recommendations. So recommend that a feasibility study for the installation of municipal services in Mount Uniacke should be added to the draft 2026-2027 budget. And I didn't mention it there, but also to the strategic plan. Recommend that the depth of the Lakeshore Residential LR zone on the east side of the Coxcomb Lake Drive be expanded by approximately 150 meters. Recommend that the portion of that property I just showed you currently designated and zoned rural use be redesignated and zoned to Walkable Comprehensive Development District as per the map attached as Appendix B, and recommend the policy statements and the municipal planning strategy be updated to allow the property to be designated WCDD. Add a new category, number 4, add a new category to the townhouse R2T zone that would permit townhouse developments and small multiplexes with on-site services in Mount Uniacke. The final location and size of the zone will be based on the results of the hydrogeological study. And recommendation, include the recommendations outlined in this report in the draft Uniacke Secondary Planning Strategy Report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Debbie. First up to speak, Councilor Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is 2025, 2026, 2027. Cannot be 2025, 2026 for some reason, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it wasn't mentioned in the strategic plan, so that's why we're also recommending that it be added to the strategic plan. So once it's in the strategic plan, then we can put it into the budget.
Okay, so how can we do, is it doable, or we have to wait till we put it? Okay. Okay, another question. The hydrogeological study, when will that be done?
The RFQ has gone out, so we're just in that process right now before we get to a consultant, and then I'll be able to tell you more once we make sure we actually have somebody respond to the RFQ.
Okay, so it's already started, like we
Yes.
already started that. So if somebody right now can do a study that there is water, can he apply for rezoning for that, or we have to wait? Like just a question. I don't know if anybody wants to do it.
A
But
rezoning to what? Sorry.
to R2T, like it's not allowed to R2T now, right? But
No,
if
so
somebody
there's-
come up with the development or rezoning for, can we initiate that, or?
Through Mr. Chair, so right now, there are no policies or regulations to allow for an R2T development
So we have to wait.
there, so you'd have to create all of those. So that's what we're,
Okay,
proposing.
and for that big property, where they need another exit, so any proposal where the other exit's gonna be, or it's gonna be total new road, or?
through you, Mr. Chair, no, there's no proposal yet of how they would allow for that access. They own a large 900 acres.
But the zone, the extended zone will only allow to go back to the,
Yeah, so there could be a connection between Waterview and Coxcomb Lake Drive, and that would supply the second access, because then you'd have two, that'd be a connector road that would go through like that, unless we change the regulations. Other than that, if they held off doing the on-site ones until they submitted for the WCDD, they could do it all at once as well, and that
Okay.
would.
So my question is, when you have something, a long road like Piggott Lake, Coxcomb Lake Road, so the second exit have to be 100, before the 100 homes at the end, or I don't know how it works.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's actually no requirement like that within the subdivision bylaw. As long as it says it has two accesses, that's,
So if you have another access at the beginning, it defeats the purpose, because you're gonna have more than 100 homes at the back.
yeah, and I'm not sure how the development officer interprets it. I don't deal with development, subdivision development that often. John, do you have any comment?
No, I don't think so. Off the top, I'm not sure either. The 100 lots would be from the nearest arterial, so.
So if
What
you
we're
have,
doing currently.
if you have a second access, if you have 100 homes pass it, or
Well, if you have
101.
if you have a second access, then there's no limit. There, it could be 200, 300, 400.
Yeah, but the road itself, still a dead-end road with more than 100 homes. If you do it before the 100 homes, if you know what I'm meaning.
But if, no, I'm not sure I do understand, because if you, it doesn't matter if you have more than 100, if you connect that to something else, now you have a second exit.
Yeah. So if they did connect these two roads, then there'd be an access on either.
Oh, yeah, if
And,
they
yeah.
connect this one, but if they want to build another access from somewhere to that road to go back to Highway 1, or I don't think they can go back to Highway 1 because they cannot create another road in the RU zone now. Or you can?
Not in the rural use zone, no.
No, you cannot.
No. So it would
they
be
have to
part of
go
a
back to the Uniac Mines Road somehow.
Yeah, so it would be part of a plan that they would have to submit through the WCDD.
Oh, yeah, and to change that to WCDD, it have to go through public hearing? Or
Yes.
We have to do public hearing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you, staff. Next up to speak, Counselor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. We've had a lot of reports, especially from economic business development and dealing with stuff about security and on-site, not only just the business parks, but through businesses throughout most rural areas. I'm wondering why mixed use was not included in here, where you have some small shops with maybe one apartment above it. Right now, that's not allowed. So I'm wondering, because that would only be a single dwelling, correct?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair, you're actually allowed to have that in the village core. You can do that right now in the village core. You can have a shop with one apartment building and with one apartment above it or two apartments. Any of your residential zones allow for home-based businesses. Your rural use zone actually allows for a wide variety of rural commercial uses. And the WCDD zone would allow for a variety of mixture as well.
Because if you look at the current village core in Mount Uniac, the village core really goes from exit 3 to the Uniac Estates property, right? It doesn't start, I believe right now, it starts around Pence Lake, I believe.
Yes,
That's
just
where it
around the
starts.
school there.
But around the school. But if you look at where a lot of the businesses, the stores, and the commercial area is, they're all located outside the village core. Eddie's Variety, all the restaurants are located outside the village core. It's all outside, and and they're surrounded by residential streets, a large number. So I really think looking at expanding that village core footprint is something that has to be looked at as well, because it would provide the opportunity, especially for people that have businesses in the area that are having a hard time attracting workers or have family members or whatever. Having an apartment or two above your business is on-site security, right? And it's used, like you go to Burnside, there are a number of businesses in Burnside in the business park that have residents inside their businesses to keep people there. So what would it take to look at having a mixed use in the village or a village core designation expanded in that area? How would we add that to the scope?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we actually brought a report regarding commercial zoning to Planning Advisory Committee a few months ago now, where we made some recommended changes. Now, that wasn't one of them at the time. We recommended expanding the regional commercial zone to allow for more commercial development by the interchange. But it wasn't brought up at that point in time, so you'd have to provide us direction to do that.
Okay. Because I'll move the recommended motion, or move the motion adding the item of exploring, expanding the village core from exit 3 to the Uniac Estate properties.
Thank you, Counselor. Warden Rolson, you want to speak before the amendment?
Just one little thing that came out of that discussion. When we are looking at changing from 100 lots to 100 units for secondary access? Can we have a look at where that second access is located and somehow do something that would prevent the access to be side by side at one end of the subdivision, which would really not improve anything? Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Council Moose, to the amendment,
Yeah, no.
to the motion?
Yeah, to the motion, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, well, thank you for Councilor Perry for moving that because it flew right off my head. And one more thing, like the way we have commercial now, it's regional commercial, and you're not allowed to put anything on the top, right, John? It's strictly commercial.
Through
Like
Mr.
the
Chair,
area
yes,
from-
that's correct. It is strictly commercial, and that's the intention of it, is to have it as commercial, so it can be more industrial, not industrial, but more intensive commercial uses on it, rather than
Yeah,
more of the community
but
commercial
if you look
uses.
at those areas, they all have homes on them, and what we are doing is not feasible. Like if you have a house with like $400,000, if you have a regional commercial, you cannot raise that house and put something under it. But if you have different zone, you could possibly do something with those small lots, because most of the lots between the Irving and the Etta Road, except one or two are 2 acres, and the rest like are 15,000 square feet or something. Okay, you cannot. They don't meet the zone requirement anyway. So I think by moving them to Village Core, it give you an option.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd recommend that you go back and look at the report, because we talked to Economic and Business Development about that, and there was some interest of some of those properties that we're proposing to zone regional commercial from potential developers. So just before recommending that we make changes to Village Core, which may eliminate some of those uses.
Oh, the big ones, I 100% agree. There's like a couple big ones, right? But at least if we give the opportunity for, they still have the opportunity to apply for zone change from regional or just stamped, and we're gonna stick with it like we did here. And one more thing I forgot to mention. In the survey, residents, they want affordable homes, and they don't want anything over 8 units. I don't think any developer can do affordable homes with only 8 units. That's something contradict each other. Like, there's no way you could do an 8 unit and make it affordable. Like, you have to go big or bigger. I mean, like 24, maybe 12, something like that. But something to look at. Thank you.
Question.
Thank you, Counselor. Questions be called on the motion. We'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed unanimous with all those who are present. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Thank you, public members. That concludes planning advisory for today. A motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Scheduled for a break at 3 o'clock. What is your wish? Break?
10 minutes.
10-minute break, coming back at 3:30. Oh, you want me to get out? Oh.
Okay, I'll call the Infrastructure and Operations Committee to order. I'll be looking for the approval of the minutes of May 21st, 2024. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? And the motion has passed. First item on the agenda is the bylaw 10-300-1, an amendment to bylaw 10-300 sewer bylaw with Nathan Hoffman. Go ahead.
Madam Chair. Ooh. Sorry, very loud. Yeah, so today we'll just be discussing an update to the sewer bylaw for your consideration. The bylaw is being opened up. The municipality has adopted a new claims management policy for insurance claims made against it for damages. Consequently, we need to update the sewer bylaw. Since we're opening up the bylaw, we thought we'd do a full review to modernize it with our current operations. So bylaw INO 300 outlines the duties of both the residents and municipality for installation, proper use, and upkeep of the municipal sewer system. To conduct this review, staff held meetings with the Director of Infrastructure and Operations, Manager of Water and Wastewater, Supervisor of Wastewater Operations, and the Procurement Officer. Staff are proposing 7 kinds of updates to this bylaw, the first of which is just very basic template and language updates. There's a few aspects missing from our previous bylaw version. Just to standardize it with the template, we have added those. Additionally, we've added more plain language definitions of technical terms and the removal of gendered language within some elements of the bylaw. Secondly, staff are proposing operations modernization. These include amendments to section 3.1, where the municipality will no longer provide saddle connections for infill development. This proposed change is being made due to the large amount of development occurring in the municipality. Additionally, section 4.4 is being amended to allow the removal of any prohibited item that is connected to our sewer system. So, for example, drain tiles have never been allowed to be tied into the municipal sewer system, but now this amendment to the bylaw actually allows the municipality to require their removal, which it couldn't in the past. The third update is an amendment to the allowable concentration of phosphorus allowed in sewer discharge water. We are proposing reducing the limit from 30 milligrams per liter down to 10 milligrams per liter. This change aligns the municipality with national standards and is being recommended due to the known impact that phosphorus has on blue-green algae blooms, which we have recently had here. The next change is an amendment to Section 12, which would exempt the municipality and properties owned by the East Hants Water Utility Service from charges under the bylaw. Current municipal practice already doesn't charge the municipality for the water usage, so this amendment would just align us with current practice. Our fifth update is clarifying the roles in the event of sewer backup. So in Schedule A, Section 3 of the bylaw, there is a section that outlines who is responsible for what in the event of a sewer backup into a resident's home. There's no change being proposed to the actual process or responsibilities. However, we are clarifying that any backup caused by a blockage in the road right-of-way is the responsibility of the municipality to clear, whereas anything in the sewer lateral on the homeowner's side is their responsibility to clear. Additionally, staff are proposing removing the prohibition of municipal staff entering a resident's home to clear a blockage. Sixth is the updated claims process. So as I alluded to earlier, the CAO has developed a new administrative policy which manages how the municipality handles damage insurance claims made against us. Essentially, it empowers the Director of Corporate Services to handle damage claims with final decision being made with the CAO. The current version of the CAO authority policy empowers the CAO to settle legal action within that is under $100,000 and within approved budget. And our final, my gosh, sorry, dry spot. The final recommendation is amendment to Section 5.4 of Schedule A. This proposed amendment would increase the charge of sewer services for schools that do not have water service from $25 per classroom per quarter up to $50 per classroom per quarter. This is being proposed effective for April 1st, 2025, so starting next fiscal year. This change is being recommended due to the significant costs of infrastructure associated with the sewer systems. This proposed change is the first raising of rates for schools since 2010. The schools impacted by this change are the Riverside Education Center in Milford and the East Hansborough High, also in Milford. Should committee or council give first reading to this bylaw in June, second reading could occur in July. There is a recommended motion for your consideration. I would be happy to answer any questions about the bylaw update process itself. However, I would refer technical questions about the sewer system operations to the Director of Infrastructure and Operations. Thank you very much, and back to the chair.
Thank you. Okay, first we have to speak Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jesse, as of now, like a great recommendation, but as of now, if you have property on Highway 1, you're also responsible for cleaning the culvert and the ditch, like where it comes. I know it's not municipal, it's provincial, but is that the same thing that we're doing, or they're different?
Through Madam Warden, that would be stormwater related and not tied to the sewer bylaw, and we're separating the topics. So the maintenance of your storm infrastructure, like if you're talking driveways and driveway access, it's ultimately a property owner's responsibility to maintain the access to your property.
So yeah, because like where my restaurant is and next one, like the gravel is almost to the top of the culvert, and I'm scared to clean it. I just want to know if it's if I can do it or no.
Oh yeah, you can.
You can do it. Thank you. I will move the recommended motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lateral of the sewer line, when you do a property, where is that? Between the rest? Is that along the ditch, from the ditch in or from the road in? Where's the lateral begin for a resident?
Okay. Through Madam Chair. So the infrastructure is the property line. A good indicator is approximately where the water shutoff valve is in comparison. And that's the line. So from that point into the road, because that's where we put all our shutoffs. It's not an exact science. Sometimes there's a difference by a few feet, but that gives you an idea. You'd have to survey to get an exact amount, but close enough. The clarity I want to make is as we interpret as staff, a break is a crack in the line. A blockage is a blockage. And so staff interpret a break and repair. So if it's within, from that property line out into the road, our municipal infrastructure will go in and fix a break in that area. If there's a blockage occurred, it happened because of what was put into the pipe. And so we would look for the homeowner to have that cleared. So, and that's a thing, is what happens a lot is you create a blockage and it starts on the homeowner side and it starts inches away and inches away and inches away. Well, you still have to clear it regardless. And so that's calling a plumber, having it cleared, and that's the differentiation, and that's how I explain it to the public. If there's a crack in the line and it's failing, and that's when the municipality would come in on our side, which is technically the road side.
It's not possible for some pumps to be pumped into the system?
Through you, Madam Chair, it is so for your stormwater of your basements, the best practice is to pump out into your lawns. You should not be tying into the sewer system. What happens when individual properties do that, if a whole neighborhood does that, it could overwhelm the sewer system, which causes backups downstream for your neighbors. And so the sewer system was designed for just the sewer flows, not for the storm flows. And so that can be a practice, and we educate for folks to go and take that out. It's not, you disperse over land. It gives chance to absorb. It can flow into ditches, into green spaces, and that's the best practice for that type of water.
So for those that are, it's illegal.
We highly encourage you to disconnect and seek a professional opinion on how to do that at your property.
And the second one is the change of school fees. What is the chance of getting payment?
Through Madam Chair, the chance of payment is very high. So we issue those on a regular basis. It's a fee that's collected if we give a reasonable amount of notice, which is we're saying April 1st as of next fiscal. We'll give them notice, and we'll collect. It's something I would anticipate being not an issue in the big picture.
I just remember back when we had a hold on collecting money from.
I don't believe it'll be an issue on this one.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, next to speak on before the motion, Madam Warden.
For a little clarification on removing the prohibition of employees to enter into people's properties. So we currently prohibit our employees from going in and doing something? I just need some clarity. That says liability to me if our employees go into their house and do something.
Through Madam Chair, this I couldn't talk to the origination of this, but it's contradictory because on the water utility side, we absolutely have always gone in because we have to go in, inspect, and react to emergencies. And this is no different on the sewer side, is even if we don't own the infrastructure, we're tied into the infrastructure and we need to be able to problem solve and identify root causes of potential contamination or things being dumped in. And so to restrict ourselves in entering, and that would have been the perspective, we are limiting our ability to investigate and protect the system as a whole. And I would actually see it as a liability for us not to be able to enter a premise.
So what happens if the homeowner doesn't allow them in?
Through you, Madam Chair, we have had that in the past on the water, and we call in support from the RCMP, and ideally there's a conversation and cooler heads prevail, or we get escorted in by the RCMP, and that could happen as well to get the visuals that are required.
Okay. Wow, I didn't know we had that authority, so thank you.
Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion has passed unanimously. The next item on the agenda is septic tank pumping disposal. And I think that's you, Jesse.
Sure. Through Madam Chair. So I don't have a presentation, but I'll talk through it because I can anticipate what information is of interest and what should be talked in the public's forum. So just as a background into the topic is there is a septic receiving site in West Hants. It's operated by GFL. It's a very large facility and is the receiving site for private septic haulers that would do pull the sludge out of septic fields of a home. Anything that comes out of like a porta potty or Ready John business. So think of all of the construction happening, all construction sites, all of those materials, all those pumping out, whether it's in East Hants or Halifax, would all end up in such a site. And so what happened last week was there was letters received by several septic haulers that they would not be limited access or have no access to the GFL site for a defined period of time or a general period of time. I have not seen the letter myself. I have heard that it is approximately 8 weeks. It's not indefinitely. There's some varying discussion on indefinitely versus not. So it becomes then what? The short term folks that need to get pumped out is where do you go and try to figure that out? And where there was no notification to the municipality, as we wouldn't, because we're not in the service. We're actually not we're not one of their customers for that service. So we didn't receive a letter. So the process for those haulers is, okay, now we have to go find an alternative site. And it's a private sector type topic. And so there isn't a requirement for notice. It's a private business. And so folks are trying to figure that out, and haulers are trying to figure out, okay, where can I go? The province has come up with a list. It's not official. I only know of the list because of looking at MLA's Facebook pages. That list is stating that there's 2 sites that will receive additional materials. That one is in Amherst and one is in Lunenburg. That's me not verifying that myself. That's me reading off a Facebook page. But once again, we don't know the magnitude because there's not a defined time nor an official statement from GFL. From a municipal staff stance, we're a bit miffed by how it all transpired because we received a call from a septic hauler inquiring it on Wednesday last week. We just so happened to be receiving some dialogue from GFL asking about sending some of our loads from vacuum trucks to their site and getting direct haul pricing, which we were working on in the afternoon Wednesday. We asked the question, and the person giving us the pricing or working on with us had no idea what the topic was about. And so we're like, okay, well, we're not sure. So we officially didn't know it was an issue until it hit CBC on Friday. We'd also called as staff for due diligence, Nova Scotia Environment, to hear if they've heard anything. Not just the Bedford office that wouldn't cover that area for approvals, but also the Valley area, those offices out of Kentville, and they weren't aware of any issues or restrictions. So Nova Scotia Environment stated to us that they were not aware. GFL stated to us on Wednesday they were not aware, and yet those statements came out. So it was really odd, and I believe that we're still in a wait and see. There is short-term things that need to be worked out, and there's some bumps along the way for haulers. There is additional costs associated and time associated with keeping up with the demand of trucking anything to Lunenburg or Amherst, but I'm not sure for the duration of time in which that's going to occur. And the magnitude of which it will impact East Hants and East Hants residents and East Hants businesses that would apply is also unknown at this point. It's subjective on, okay, it depends on when you've got pumped out. Most people are on a 2 to 3 year cycle at your home. Where are you on your cycle? It may cost you double of what it normally would. That's me speculating on what someone would price. But it's not that you can't get service. It's that there might be a delay because now a hauler would have to take twice as long to do one load. And so they'd have a backlog of work for a defined period of time. And we don't know what the full extent of the GFL plan is. Is it officially 6 weeks, 8 weeks? Are they expanding? Are they shutting down and doing restricted services? It is my understanding that they are not closed to everyone, that there is continued operations at that site. But once again, I'm not getting that officially. I'm getting that secondhand. And so there's a lot there, that unknown is continuing. And it's tricky for the municipality as it's a service we don't we don't provide that service in today's world. We do have 3 wastewater treatment plants. That said, is we have approvals to operate that are issued by Nova Scotia Environment, and we have to adhere to those regulations. And our flows and how we treat are based on continuous known flows that are predictable, and we model our operations around it. We're not set up to receive slugs of flow, if you will, or unknown, nor do we have ability to set charges. Our largest facility is the Lance Lagoon, and I'll talk openly about it, is our access is not the best. We actually don't own the road or driveway we get into the site. If you look at the PID around it, it's a box. We only own the lagoon itself. So it's pretty rough to get in there. It's a gated fence. We don't have staffing there all the time. So how we could accommodate would be challenging. And then, as I mentioned on Wednesday, we were trying to get pricing because we vacuum out, say, if we're doing maintenance, a lift station. We suck out the lift station and have that dumped in the lagoon. That practice has been causing damage that's becoming a greater and greater maintenance risk, and we're trying to direct haul that to West Hants because it's causing damage. And so to bring in unknown vehicles and unknown workers, that will create more liability. And staff aren't certain we could actually keep our treatment standards in place depending on what the flow is. It's not to say everything's happening at once, but we're very cautious from a staff perspective is what is this? What's going on? And there's some flags on liability and risk. And I don't know that the municipality can help at this point, unfortunately. It's really tricky too. It's the every wastewater treatment site has different approvals to operate, has different limits. And where our Lance Lagoon outflows is into the Shubenacadie River, our limits are significantly tighter in Lance than they are in Shubenacadie because of tidal waters. And they vary from site to site to site. So a site with a direct outflow into the ocean would be in a much better place to handle surprise flows from an emergency than we are where we're inland in fresh water with sensitive species. So it's a complex topic for agencies like DFO, Nova Scotia Environment, consultation with Aboriginal groups who, Shubenacadie River is a focal point for Spagna Nakqui First Nations cultures. There's so much responsibility at a municipal level to engage all these stakeholders on any decisions. So emergency comes up like this, where on a service we don't provide, it throws us into a gray. What is the conversation? What is the role? I don't know that answer. So that's where, from a staff stance, we continue to monitor. Ultimately, I'd give you the opinion that the biggest user of that site is all flow coming out of Halifax, and Halifax is a monster that can't fail. And so a solution will emerge, and it will be driven by Halifax. And we need to be very much in touch with that, whatever that solution is, and become a part of it. That would be my suggestion, but I don't know what that is. And I also don't know if Halifax is just going to wait it out for the next 8 weeks. They may. I don't know. And that's what I know. It's all speculative because it's not official, because we haven't heard anything official from GFL nor Nova Scotia Environment nor any agency. We have the same information that the public has from hearsay on Facebook and articles by CBC and CTV on Friday. So that's the topic from the staff perspective.
Okay, thank you. First to speak is Councillor Rhino.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Just a few things I've heard. I had a call from a certain individual with a question. So myth or fact, HRM now has no place to dump?
Both myth and fact. So I will explain that. So HRM also has access to some volume that they take at the Aerotech treatment facility at the airport. It is my understanding that they are not able to take more volume. In fact, Halifax Water, that operates the site, called East Hants looking for our help. So they don't believe they can take more at that facility, but there is flows that do go to that facility. And there are East Hants haulers that do take some material to that facility as well.
Yeah, I was told that there's a list, waiting list there, and it would be eons before that anybody could ever get in there. Now, that's what I've been told. I was also told, well, and fact or myth, is that there's trucks already going into Lance Lagoon, has been previously before this happened, dumping sewage. Is that a myth or fact?
Oh, that's a myth, 110%. So I'll talk to that one.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, is we have an excavation contract, and a part of that excavation contract has vacuum truck processes. Like I said, if we have to if we have to do maintenance on a lift station, the pumps are down. We have to suck out that flow to keep the system going, and we'll put that material back in the lagoon. That's Bennery, our contractor, that's doing it in conjunction with our staff who are with them when it happens.
Okay.
That's it, and it's part of our operations. There's
Somebody's
no
seeing trucks going in there. That's what it is.
that's what it is, and it's in it. So there is no other flows or volumes that are permitted, nor do we give anyone permission to do so.
Okay. I was also told that private contractors, such as the one in Colchester, who have private sites, are all not allowed to take outside. It's only a deal between the environment and the company that has it. You know, I'm talking the one off the 289 there in Green Creek there. So apparently I said, I told this gentleman, I said, well, did you check with the private? And he said that it's a private company that have the contract or agreement with the environment, and they're not allowed to take outside, only their own. So I don't know if there's any truth to that or what it is. But anyway.
Okay.
I guess what do we need? What do we need? Rough, a ballpark cost. What will we need in East Hants to create something that would tackle this problem? And that's probably what I'm going to hear is probably quite a few millions of dollars. And I'm probably going to hear it's going to take quite a bit. All right, I'm prepared for that. But when we talk about shovel-ready projects, such as different things through infrastructure and stuff, when funding becomes different forms of funding becomes from different forms of government, I get thinking, well, wouldn't this just fit to be one of those perfect little projects there that would benefit the entirety of East Hants? Because other than what's on the sewer system here and a little bit it should be, the rest of the municipality at some point has to pump out their own tanks. So it has a great benefit. So roughly what do we need? What would be the rough cost on something? And is it feasible? And to me, like I said, it could be one of those shovel-ready projects if it's at all entirely doable. Do we need a study? Do we need to look into it further? What do we need?
Through you, Madam Chair, before I talk pricing, the most valuable asset in that discussion is time. You need time. This is something that if we were going to explore this is like we're going to take 5 years to work through it. It's not something that you can pull off in a year. It just isn't. And I'll talk through that.
I don't expect it is, Jesse. To be
Yep.
fair, I don't expect it is.
Yep.
But I'm talking down the road
Yep.
in the future, when something like this may happen again, could this be a project ready down the road?
Through you, Madam Chair, it could be, depending on what the level of services that council wanted to provide, the opportunity would be around, you'd need to do environmental studies. You'd have to identify where. You'd have to identify the technology required. Do you have the land that it will fit? The answer there will be land acquisition required in any scenario where the municipality got involved. It will not fit in any of our locations. I can tell you that right now. So
I guess could it be an addition to our sewer system that we have now? That's where I'm kind of leaning with this.
Yeah.
Or we have to build a standalone site.
Through Madam Chair, there's different ways to do it, and it would depend. It's just the risk. If you're, who are you looking to serve as a municipality? What are you open to? If you're pure residential septic systems and you're confident you can maintain that, it gets risky. You could incorporate it with the next iteration of an expansion. You could retrofit something existing. You know, every time you have an approval to operate renewal, there's an opportunity to expand service or renegotiate, but you got to study in advance to get those changes done. If it was standalone, so I was just looking at it. It's the variability. It's what's sensitive environmentally is we've got two watersheds that ultimately will flow into, and it's either the Grand Lake Greater Shubenacadie watershed, or we're flowing into the Kennecott. That's kind of or we're getting it to Cobequid Bay / the Minas Basin. So if it was standalone, I'd have it on the Knoll Shore. And the funny part about that is that's not that far away from GFL is today. And this is me doing tabletop this morning. It gets complicated, and just doing high level scenarios of where we would go and how we would tackle it. That's a report. Then we'd have to go back and do some studies to question that. That's another report, and it plays out over a couple of years to know what the conversation really is.
So if I can just interject, this being kind of a one-off of what was already a one-off. So Councillor, are you thinking that you just looking down the road, or are you thinking you'd like to make a motion that staff actually look into this?
I'd like to see, I think it's worthy of a report of some kind, whether we go along with it, whatever we do. I think it is worthy of some kind of further investigation to see what we could do from here. And I'm glad to see that, your first thing was down along the shore. That's great, getting something.
Oh my God, it doesn't look garbage from
But we already have one on one side of the bay, so, on that Shubenacadie River. So that's where that one on that 289 in Green Creek is, straight along the bay. So, and I just think it's open to, of all the things we study here, I think this is, a very worthy something to look further into, and we may shut it off at the knees, or we may go further with it. But I'd be interested to see what my fellow colleagues would say about it. But I really think it is worth for further study of some kind. Fully being aware this could take years. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up to speak is Councillor Hebb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the answers, Jesse. You've kind of put on the spot, something come up this reading, and I knew that you probably hadn't had time to get any kind of answers, and you've answered that because there's no answers out there right now. Councillor Rhino kind of tipped on what I was going to bring up, but I think it's worthy to do some kind of report on what the options may be for the municipality if something like this comes up, not on a permanent basis, but if something comes up like this for a month or two, we have to have some place to dump our sewage. Where and what is the best practice that we could do that down the road? And by having a report like this, and if council backs it, why then we could kind of work forward. And like I said, like Councillor Rhino said, a shovel ready. But then if we have to do an upgrade in one of these treatment plants, why then it might be something we could implement it in at that time. So I will make a motion that staff come back with a report in regards to handling sewage from the rural areas of the municipality and what the options could be in the future.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Actually, got a couple of people on for the motion, so. Warden Austin, go ahead.
Thank you. So, just to clarify, a lot of the questions folks are getting is why can't we dump in the Lance Lagoon? The reason is the Lance Lagoon was not designed to accept commercial loads. The access to the Lance Lagoon is not optimal, and even dumping what we have to pump from our lift stations damages the Lance Lagoon when we dump there. Is that correct?
All three of those are correct.
Okay, so the Lance Lagoon is not an option at this time. Our other treatment plants are different. They're not lagoons, correct?
Correct?
And they're not options, they're not set up to receive either because the
There's-
bumps in flows and that, we can't do it.
They weren't designed to have a dumping setup
Yeah.
for them.
Okay. Plus, we have never had a study on the capacity of the Lance Lagoon. If it were feasible to dump things there, we don't know what the capacity is there with all the development we're undergoing ourselves. You know, there's a lot of
going
what
on there.
ifs out there. So a motion has been made to do some kind of a report or study. And I'm not opposed to that, but I think it needs to be tightened up. Because I think to do the type of report or study that Councillor Rhino is looking for is going to take an immense amount of staff time and perhaps even have to be contracted out. And that could bump something else from a list of projects that are already in the queue. And I'm not quite sure what Councillor Hebb's idea is to just have staff research what options there might be for future problems. And I'm not sure how much more they can do on that than what they've already done, because GFL's not answering any questions. And we kind of know who's accepting and who's not. So is the topic of East Hants developing some type of septic disposal for this type of thing something we want to do? That's something we'd have to decide, and I don't know if that's maybe behind Councillor Hebb's motion or not, but I would be looking for something very, very preliminary. You know, something that maybe outlines what's available elsewhere and the time, something that outlines to us the time it would take to do a study to determine that, and the resources that would be required, like could we do it in-house? Do we have to contract it out? I mean, those are the questions that I have. It's certainly a problem right now. What's going to happen if one of the rural schools in the area has a sewer problem within 8 weeks, or any homeowner for that matter? It's going to be challenging. So I don't know, I guess I'd just like to hear from staff time-wise what they feel is doable at this point in time, if any more than what they've already done. And I think we should be pushing back on, I don't know, the province environment of something to try and see if they can't determine some options for folks, because they're the people that regulate this. And yeah, so it's not an easy topic, but I think the answer that people are asking from some of us, if they get a hold of it, is you need to fix this immediately, and we don't have the ability to fix this immediately. We simply do not. And I don't think we have the ability to fix it anytime soon. I heard Jesse say minimum of 5 years to get, you know, the research and that and everything done. So I guess that's my ramble. With regards to the motion that's on the floor, I need some clarity because I don't really understand what that motion is directing us to do. So I don't know, maybe if, does staff have an understanding, or does Eldon want to clarify? The CAO would like to ask.
Through you, Madam Warden, I agree with Madam Chair. I think, we're trying to jump right into something that we know nothing about. We know there's a problem right now. We don't know how long it's going to, we're going off Facebook posts from MLAs, and so I'm a little uncomfortable jumping into a full-blown, we want to be the provider of septic service disposal for central Nova Scotia. I might suggest that a report would be sort of that jurisdictional scan on what is available and what the opportunities are, before we get into what the cost would be, what the different options and locations and sites and whatnot, because that is a massive, massive undertaking, which really, something that large is equivalent to me of doing, how are you going to process your organics, or where's your water treatment going to come from? Like, that's the kind of level that you're talking about. So I think we need to understand the provincial landscape first before we jump into anything. And I don't know if Councillor Hebb's report was more than that, but you can start the conversation, but I think what you're referring to is something that needs to be in your next strategic plan, if that's the direction you want to go into to get into that business, because it's a whole different service that we don't provide right now, and it comes with a whole other set of environmental regulations, monitoring, staff, depot, whatever that looks like. It's huge. So I'm a little uncomfortable just jumping into a full-blown report, so I would like some scope. Is it that jurisdictional scan that you're looking for, or are we jumping right in?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Matt. Going way above and beyond what my intent of the motion is. My intent of the motion is, I know, Jesse, you had mentioned that when they do an upgrade for a lift station, it might be possible to put something in at that time. Is that an option? Is there an option to have a holding area somewhere for temporary services? I don't want to do a whole big blowout of all this. I don't think we need that right now. And as the CAO said, it's going to be costly and time consuming. I'm kind of looking at the future of this, something like this happens again. What options do we have? Is that something, doing these lift stations, as putting something in there that we can actually do that? Not on a full-time basis, but an emergency situation. And basically what are our options out there? I don't want to see any studies or anything like that, but you're in that business and you have an idea, what options are out there and what may be feasible and what not. And to have one in the Royal part or wherever it's going to be, yeah, you're talking 5 years out and then all kinds of environmental assessments and all that, and then we may end up spending all that money and not be allowed to do it anyway. So I'm just looking at options, what could be right now and in the future. What's going on there now, we can't control that now. We've got no control over that at all. And whether it's 2 or 3 weeks, a month, whatever it is, we just can't do it. But I think it's prudent for us to look in the future and say, is this something we can work towards? And if it comes up again, we have an option for it. We're not taking other districts' sewage, we just take our own in an emergency situation. That's basically what my intent and my motion is, and I don't know whether I've clarified that enough or not.
Yeah. Through Madam Chair, I believe I understand the intent. It's what I think the report will end up being is, first off, I think it will be late fall because we need to incorporate everything we've learned that's going to happen in the weeks ahead. That's the reality, is we don't know what we don't know, and it's going to play out because this hasn't been a topic that other municipal units have sorted out. That's why we're here today. And it's going to set up a strategic conversation is, here's the landscape. Here's what we've learned from this event. At a high level, here's some contingency planning. Here's some things that we could look at if we wanted to build in more contingency as a municipality, whether that's new plants or retrofits or what have you. And then it's going to be, is this part of the next strategic priority list or next strategic review, which will be the next version of council will need to decide how far we go. But understanding the situation is what can happen in the next few months ahead is where I think I would, that's how I'm interpreting it. And that's the notes I'm taking. Does that, if that sounds right, that's where staff would go with it.
You're right on, Jesse. I didn't expect an answer tomorrow or next week, or actually, if you said by the fall, I'm surprised it's that early, because I know what you have to go through. But I think we have to do this for future events in case it happens, and be prepared for it. And that, like I say, that'll be in another council's decision to where they go from there. But I think we have to start something right now, and so that in the future we can be prepared for what's going to come. So, yeah, you're on the right track there. Thank you.
The seconder of the motion.
Next to speak is Councillor Eisner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To infrastructure? Yes. Anything to do with Georgefield? I mean, can we put a cell in there? I know it's
Through you, Madam Chair, that will be in the next report because that would be one of the options in play.
the other.
It's complicated and a topic, and I'm going to need some time to explain it. We've considered that at a high level in the past, but there's a lot to it, so that would be in there.
For the quicker question.
Yep.
Can we put funding out for the people that have to haul their waste to other sites within the province? Could we set up some funding to help them out? Because it's going to be trucked, if somebody will take it, but somebody's going to have to take it. We might have to encourage them with money.
No, I don't believe so. I'm not the finance background.
Okay, then we'll just.
So what I would suggest something, if this turns into a provincial-wide emergency scenario, I think advocating for some sort of disaster relief for our residents to the province would be an option. But we don't know that that's the situation yet. We just don't know. So it's early to have that kind of conversation.
Thank you.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question on, will the municipality put another public statement to this effect, or just is going to let it die, go the way it is?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't see that we have a role here to play in a statement. I mean, we could put out something that says we're not, or, our message is going to be and has been all week, we are not equipped to take septic from outside companies. That's the limit to what we should do as far as a communication perspective, because it's not our story to tell, and we don't know enough information to tell it.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Rhino.
Well, I just can't seem to win. One wants to dump it in Georgefield, one wants to dump it on the shore. I can't win at all here today. So, no, but being a seconder of the motion, I do agree with what Councillor Hibbs said. I don't want an in-depth report. I want some kind of, here's some options what we can do. But in those options, I would expect here's an option that we could build onto or retrofit a site that would take this in an emergency, or you can go a standalone option with an approximate value of blah, blah, blah. And those are the general things. Keep it generalized right now so we kind of know we work ourselves into it. With in-depth report, no. I think it's a step process. Once we get that, does council want to go any further? Do you want to go any deeper into this? And then it can be stepped up and going down the road from there. But no, I'm not looking for, it's going in downtown, whatever. And here we are. I'm just looking to see what we could do for down the road and in the future. And the first step would be kind of a generalized report with options, and we can take it from there further. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Question.
Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the vote has passed unanimously. Okay, our next item is an in-camera item, so I'll be looking for a motion to move into camera.
Second.
Moved and seconded, we'll be going into camera. Thank you. Okay, so we've just been in camera with a land issue, and we have a motion coming forward from an in-camera item. Councillor Perry?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the Infrastructure Operation Committee recommend to council send a letter to the province advocating that any future replacement of the old Enfield Road overpass crossing Highway 102 incorporates an on and off ramp connectivity to support housing and population growth for Nova Scotia, and that the province actively seek out design consideration from the municipality of East Hants in the long-term planning of that asset. I so move.
Nothing else for infrastructure?
We gotta go back to park, to
Oh, okay, okay. We're actually going to go back to Parks, Rec, and Culture.
we'll have to adjourn from this.
Okay, so we're going to adjourn from Infrastructure and Operations Committee and go back to Parks, Rec, and Culture. I'll be looking for a motion for adjournment. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? We are adjourned.
Call this meeting of Parks, Rec, and Culture back together. We still have two items, I think it's two, on the DFRs. And so I will turn it back to Joe to handle this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next one on the list is the Uniacke Legion. They're looking for funding, less than half of their project, $5,388.
Uniacke, first up to speak, Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, I do know for this project, they were seeking outside funding to cover off. Do you know if they've received the outside funding? Is this all that's remaining?
Yes, through the chair, they have received funding from the Legion of Canada. Yep.
Canada. So this is all that's outstanding?
This is the remaining piece they need, yes.
Okay. Yeah. I'll fund the remaining amount. If the other councillor from Mount Uniacke wants to go splits, he can.
All right. Councillor Musa.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I will go have to, like we'll do as usual. And I have to add something. I already talked to the CAO. Like the Legion is AMO center, and we only we only help them out like with generator right now. But I think if we can add accessibility, if everybody agree, I think accessibility is very important for our shelters too. So I think we should be doing something. It doesn't have to apply to this one, but in the next future, probably staff can bring a report to add some stuff to the AMO center. Thank you.
All right, is that all, Councillor?
Thank you.
All right, staff, you have those?
Yes.
Okay. And the next one?
Is Enfield Rugby, and it's for their clubhouse project. The recommendation, as we said earlier, they want 30,000, and half of what's remaining in District 10 is 14,640 with a shortfall of 15,360.
All right. And first up, Councillor Tom Eisner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I would like to give 15,000 to the rugby. Be nice to get some washrooms down there. I don't think the only washrooms we got is in the Lions building, and I don't know if that's open. But there's a lot of ball field, and there's a lot of playing ground there. So maybe they incorporate a public
Well,
washroom.
they can only get, we're only dealing with what they've asked for, right? So we can't go and tell them, yeah, you got to do this and do that. Is it part of it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, excuse me. So you want to give 15,000?
Yeah, towards that.
To award the shortfall?
Shortfall?
15,360.
Oh,
It would be 15 even if he does 15.
15 easy?
Like, the remaining shortfall is now 15.
Great. Go for it. Thank you.
Councillor Garden Cole.
I want to give 8,000.
Taken in by staff. Councillor Norval Mitchell.
Shortfall, 7.
7.
I'll give the additional 7 to complete that project.
So is everybody clear on this? Whose district does this fall under? Tom's? Okay, so you're good with everything?
Thank you.
Okay. Staff good?
Yep.
So that brings us to the end. Do you have a recommended motion? And forgive me, I don't think there was anything other than those additions.
Correct, thank you. So we had a recommended motion earlier, and the motion that was made during the report takes away the third part, and we've actually drafted the motion with the funding so far, summarizing everything except the rugby right here, so I can quickly go. Yeah. Correct. And 8 and 7.
You're gonna fill those in and then.
Yep, there's the motion right now, District 2 and District 1. And this is now 30. And so the motion at the top, just that you approve the DRF for the second intake as below.
All right. Okay, you've heard the report. And you see a recommended motion out there. It's up to you if you want to take this recommendation and follow forth with it. What's your wish? Warden Ralston. This way. There.
I would move the recommended motion as shown on the screen.
Duly moved and seconded. Go to the vote. No comment or question, I guess. Excuse me. I don't see anybody wanting to speak. Questions been called. We'll go to the vote. Everybody voted? What? Oh, yeah. And the vote is in and it's passed unanimously. And I do believe that brings us to the end of Parks, Recreation, and Culture. And we will adjourn that and go into council. Their extended meeting of council.
So moved.
Moved? Seconded? All those in favor? Aye. Contrary mind, motion's carried. Once again, it's been a pleasure.
Are we ready? Okay, folks, we'll call this meeting of council for policy and in camera to order. The first item on the agenda is the Corporate and Residential Services Committee report. Over to you. Are you taking that, Councillor Perry? Wait a minute here.
Thank you, Madam Warden. The committee held its regular meeting on June 18th, 2024, and the following motions are coming forward as a result of that meeting. Fire Service Funding Policy Review. The Fire Service Funding Policy outlines the funding the municipality of East Hants provides to the East Hants Fire Service. The policy being updated to clarify language and include the recent growth management grants for the fire service. Move that the Corporate Residential Service Committee recommends to Council that Council give notice of intent to approve the Fire Service Funding Policy as attached to the Executive Committee agenda dated June 18th, 2024. As Chair of the Committee, I so move.
Seconded by Councillor Musa. Is there any discussion on the motion? Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed unanimously.
Special Reserves Policy. As Council creates new reserves and depletes others, the appendix to the Special Reserves Policy requires updates. Staff are bringing forward the report to amend the Special Reserves Policy for Council consideration. The Corporate and Residential Service Committee recommends to Council that Council give notice of intent to approve the amendments to the Special Reserves Policy as attached to the June 18th, 2024 Executive Committee agenda. As Chair of the Committee, I so move.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Question has been called. And the motion is passed unanimously.
As Chair of the Committee, I move the adoption of this report.
Seconded by Councillor Hebb. All those in favor? Contrary? Motion is carried. Next, we have two in-camera items on the docket. One is a land issue, and the second is a CAO priorities. So I would be looking for a motion to go in camera.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Perry, seconded by Councillor Mitchell. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary? Motion is carried. We'll wait for staff to advise us that we are in camera. I think we're close. I would report that we met in camera to discuss a land issue, and we will discuss CAO priorities at a future time. Out of those discussions, we do have motions coming forward. I will go to Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I move that council approve a temporary borrowing resolution and resolution for pre-approval for land acquisition for development lands in the amount of $4,310,000, and that the average interest rate of the debentures not exceed a rate of 6.5% for a term not to exceed 25 years.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion?
Question.
We'll go to the vote. And the motion was passed by a vote of 9-1, with Councillor Rhino voting nay. Back to you, Councillor Perry.
I move the council approve a temporary borrowing resolution and resolution for pre-approval for land acquisition for the development of lands in the amount of $4,320,000, that the average interest rate of the debenture not exceed the rate of 6.5% for a term not to exceed 25 years.
Seconded by Councillor Mitchell. Any discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. And the motion is passed by a vote of 9-1, with Councillor Rhino voting nay. So that concludes the business on the agenda today. I would be looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Perry, seconded by Councillor McPhee. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary? Motion is carried. Staff